Good evening, everyone. This is Friday Conversations from King's Wisbech. You'll appreciate that we've had a few technical issues, but it's lovely to see everyone on the live chat. And I'd like to welcome Nathan Hayward to this conversation. He's moved to the area a few years ago and he's a musician, and I'll let him talk about himself if I may. So, how did you get to Wisbech?
Well, I was brought up in London, and my dad was a London City missionary, and so brought up in a Christian home. Lived in London. Well, trying to think how old I was. How old am I? Nigh on 40 years, and then we've got me and my wife have a big family. We have 6 children, and we had a very small house in London, a 2-bedroom terrace. And so we had been praying about moving. We were very involved with the church there, so we didn't think we would be moving far.
Okay.
And various things happened. I mean, we were praying about where we should go and whether we should just move a little bit out into Kent or whatever, and the door seemed to be shut. And it would, the whole idea of moving would come in and out of our minds, you know. But then Rachel's parents moved, and to see them move was like a bit of a miracle, really, because they've been in this house a long time, and and just how the Lord worked in that, really, and how He worked in the situation, almost, well, to a certain extent, made it uncomfortable for them where they were, and moved them on. It was really very right that they moved, and the timing was perfect. And so we just prayed, well, Lord, if you want us to move, will you stir up the nest a bit, you know? And He certainly did, and we had some difficulties along the way, and it ended up us moving out here, really.
Right.
Through one, circumstance after another. Probably a bit of a long story to tell you everything, but
that's okay.
Yeah.
Going back to something you said, where you were brought up in a Christian family. So, how did you find Jesus for yourself in that kind of setup?
That's a good question. I think there was a point where I prayed with my parents when I was very young. I think I was 4, and I had a desire to know God, and I had parents who really cared that I should know God, and so, when you've got people like that around who it's really the most important thing to them, you think, well, this must be something pretty big. But as you say, you're brought up in a Christian home, and you hear all the phrases, and you see church at its best and its worst, and there needs to come a time where you do actually make that decision for yourself. And I don't think, actually, for me, there was one particular point. There were various points where, because it's such, how you've been brought up is such a deep part of who you are, that you can't change that or switch that in a moment, So there are various points where my faith became more and more my own, I think, as I grew up. I think more near my latter teens. One was getting baptised.
Mm-hmm.
And the first kind of challenge is, should I get baptised? And I think that's a really good, baptism is a really good challenge for a teenager. My parents made sure it was a late teens before they would even countenance that, because they wanted me to fully understand.
Yeah.
And so you actually really start thinking, oh well, actually then, if I'm getting baptised, I really am going for it, you know, and that it brings a deeper sense of realisation of what you're doing. And I remember after I was baptised, I nosedived spiritually. I don't know quite what it was, but I think it can happen with some people. And then a year or so later, I got involved with a young adults. It was a very small conference. It was in the summer, and there were just, I think there was only about 25 there. But they all really wanted to know the Lord, and they were all like fully there to learn more. And it was serious Bible teaching, serious prayer, and and I think that the Lord really met with me during that week, and I was baptised in the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And really, it's from there, I think I was much more stable in my faith, and I'm still living at home at that point. And just over time, you meet with more and more challenges, which challenge where you're at, and then you move on to a deeper level, don't you? So I think.
So in the church setup, were you ever, and your family, were you ever tempted to rebel as a stroppy teenager, or were you a stroppy teenager? Or
I'd say the word that would sum me up as a teenager was awkward. I think awkward in my own skin, you know, not quite knowing what to say in social situations, and you know, and because I didn't quite know what to say, I'd say the wrong thing. If I talked at all, you know, a lot of time I'd just be, you know, quiet, moody character in the corner. I was quite introspective, really, in a lot of ways. So I think I had a quiet rebellion at home, really. Not being very nice to my parents and that sort of thing. I never really kind of splurged out and you know, did anything terrible particularly, but certainly within my heart and mind, I think there was a period of rebellion, certainly.
Okay, but and where did music fit into your life as you were growing up?
There was always music at the church, obviously, and I think actually, in musical terms, it's really good for kids to go to church, because they're going to somewhere where at least they're singing once a week, you know. And there's a lot of encouragement to get involved with music groups and sing. I mean, the main thing for me as a kid, I tried learning guitar, and I have never got on with guitar. There's just one instrument I really, you know, I think there are reasons for that, but I'm not going to bore people with that.
No, that's okay.
My brother learnt to play guitar, so he would strum some chords and sing, and I would sing along and sing harmony, that sort of thing. Yeah. So we had a little kind of duo going. My parents weren't particularly enamoured of pop music at all, so we would have Christian music on, or my mum would play Richard Clayderman. Which actually...
he's probably a good pianist.
He is. He's actually quite an exceptional pianist. I mean,
yeah.
And in terms of tone and cleanness, I've never seen him play a wrong note, which is actually quite an amazing thing. But obviously, it's very kind of lift music. But actually, if you listen to the arrangements, they're very well put together.
Okay.
So yeah, you know, but it's not particularly hip.
I'm being reminded that we ought to invite people to ask questions, because I forgot to mention that at the beginning. And Keith has asked, what instrument do you play? So
I'm primarily a pianist, and I play violin as well.
Beautifully as well. I'd forgotten that. Yeah.
A little bit of bass. And violin goes along with. You can play mandolin as well if you play violin, because it's tuned the same way. So I play mandolin sometime. Yeah.
So which is your first love, or and technique, as it were?
Well,
So
my
both.
first instrument is piano. Yeah, and then violin, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a jazz pianist, really. That's my area of expertise, if you see.
Right, so for those who won't know what a jazz pianist is, can you give a sort of short description of how it works, what it does for you, kind of thing, the music you can
Okay, well, jazz pianists
play?
are generally poor people. And aside from that,
Yeah.
How does jazz piano vary from, well, I mean, if you were to take a situation where we were talking earlier about playing in a restaurant,
Yeah.
if you're a classical pianist, you have, tens of thousands of pieces available to you that are pre-written, for solo piano. So, you have a repertoire.
Yes.
A jazz pianist would kind of at most have a lead sheet where you would have the melody written out and then chord symbols
Right.
over the top, and from that you would work up an arrangement as you go.
Okay.
And then there are a certain amount of jazz standards which really you should know from memory.
Mhm.
You play through the tune, then you use the chord structure to improvise over, and then you play the tune again. I mean, if you're playing with a band, it's generally the same thing, really. You have to alter what you're doing accompaniment-wise because you've got other instruments. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of freedom, a lot of improvisation. It's a language, really. So you need to have listened a lot and to have learnt, what the people before you have played, listened to records, learn their solos, understand what they're doing harmonically, and then kind of build up a a vocabulary of musical thoughts and phrases which you can just bring out at the drop of a hat, and then hopefully it leads to something that is new and fresh each time you play. It doesn't always, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so you need the technical knowledge to play with it, as it were.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
take it further in whatever direction you
Yes.
want to.
Yeah.
Okay, so how does that then fit in with your Christian faith? How do you mix the two?
I think the Lord takes us a certain way in life, doesn't He? And these things become part of who we are. So in a sense, it gets mixed up before ever it finds expression. I guess, though, I have, because I write Christian music as well, and in the past I've very much not written in a jazz style, just because, church music sounds like this, and jazz sounds like this, and that. So if I write a church song, it sounds like this,
Okay.
But as recently, I think I've been writing a few more songs because I've been uploading a song a month on YouTube, and they're all original songs, mostly anyway. There's one old hymn, but
so if people wanted to go and look that up on YouTube, what should they go for?
well, if you put Nathan Hayward, and probably the name of one of my songs, so maybe what would be the easiest one? There's a song we might be able to listen to later called I Wake Up in the Dark, so you could put Nathan Hayward, I Wake Up in the Dark, and then you'll find that song hopefully, and then you'll be able to click on my channel and find some more songs. So yeah, please do explore, and if you like it, subscribe please. But the wider point is that the discipline of having to get something together every month, being away from church in one sense. It's more of a it's less of a thing for use in church and more of something to just edify people or challenge people, that sort of thing. So it's not for congregations to sing.
Yeah.
There's been a bit more of the jazz element coming through sometimes, and certainly in writing harmony, I'm always thinking in terms of jazz, so it may not always come through, but a lot of the chords, because I write some string arrangements as well, a lot of the chords in the strings will be what you find voiced in a jazz ensemble, that sort of thing. So it does come through. I dislike, and I might offend some people here, but I dislike when people go out and say, let's do Christian jazz, because it can be very corny, very cheesy, and you're kind of shoehorning Christian into because
box.
we want to do jazz, and I think sometimes what becomes important is the style of music rather than the Lord, I have heard it done well a few times. There's a couple of things that Helen Shapiro sung and stuff like that, where it's actually been done very sensitively and very well, but I have also heard some terrible stuff, So
so really, what you would want is a genuine expression of faith in good music, as opposed to that would lead to jazz purists to turn it off and think, oh, that's terrible. Or
absolutely. Jazz purists to go, that's really good music, but that be the only effect. So you either do it really well, and be like completely focused on the music, and it's almost as if the Lord is on the side, or you do it really badly, and everyone turns off then, apart from the odd Christian who wants to hear a bit of, something a bit more jazzy. I don't know. I think.
How do you marry the two? Because I remember years ago I was in a C of E choir, and I did a choir school one summer, and of all things I was chanting psalms, and and by then I was already a Christian as well, which helped. And I remember being caught that we were focusing on the technique and getting it right, and then as I was doing that, I remember the Christian truth would come out and sort of smack me in the face, and I was thinking, well, that's unusual. But I suppose it's that kind of dual thing of you want the truth to be there, but also the music to inspire as well.
I think, with all of this, you can't draw really hard and fast rules. You can never say that Christian jazz can never work, because it does. Occasionally you get something really good. So you cannot say you can't do Christian jazz. But I think it's when...
Well, in years gone by, some Christians would say that jazz was pretty dodgy, wouldn't they, and the devil. So what would you say of that? What would you say of that?
Well, I would say that if you're in a situation where there are associations with some, strong associations with something that's really not right, then you've got to question, should this be in church? And I think in that way, maybe at that time some Christians were right to say what we do with jazz. But then you cannot make a rule of it. As soon as you make a rule of it, you're putting extra rules around the Bible that are just not there. There's no verse that says you mustn't play jazz in church. So I think I was talking to a friend recently about this. I think a lot of it is basically down to the musician what are they seeking to do? Where is their heart in it? And I think you can hear it. I think if you, if you, and even then, there may be something that is written without, with wrong motives even, that could bless someone, because the Lord can do that.
He does.
So,
he does. Yeah.
I think each one of us needs to walk according to our integrity, without falling into legalism.
Yeah.
But also not going the whole other hog and say, and ignoring maybe a little check we have. I'm really not sure about this.
Yeah.
I don't think we should ignore those things. So
No.
so there's like quite a narrow course to plot, I think, and as a musician as well, because it's easy as a musician to get really caught up with the music and forget about the Lord, and then you can go the other way where people just have no thought to the music and just it's all about the Lord, and that is right. But then if you get someone who if the music is really bad, it can distract.
Yes.
It can be so bad that it just, the whole thing flops, and it's too distracting because the music's so awfully done, and the focus goes off the Lord. And on the other extreme, it can be done so well and so slickly that the Lord is completely forced out of the situation. I think it's really down to the musician to be sensitive in the moment and to know, be willing to submit the ego to the Lord, but also to do it well. So play skillfully. Was it Psalm? One of the Psalms, can't remember.
Yeah.
One of the three biggest Psalms says, "Play skillfully."
Yeah.
And I really like that because,
Well, when David set up worship in the temple, he had people who were at the top of their game, as it were, wasn't he?
Totally. Yeah. He didn't hold back, and that's. I think we can hold back for reasons of legalism sometimes. But I think we do need to be careful as well with what we're playing with music, because it's a very powerful thing.
Yeah. I think you made a really good point of surrendering to the Holy Spirit what we have. When I follow Jesus, or when I'm worshipping with the clarinet, and church members have had to suffer that over the years, there comes I remember it was at someone's baptism, and God caught me by surprise and says, "I want you to play." And I'm thinking, I'm used to getting a Bible verse for someone at their baptism, but and the thing is, before you play, you don't know. I never know where it's going, and it's an act of faith, just to do that. And it was lovely. I think it was Jackie's baptism, because while I was doing that, apparently God then was speaking to her, and Clive had got a picture, so that kind of confirmed to me that I wasn't on a frolic of my own, but it was inspired by the Holy Spirit. But it's terrifying, because you don't know what he's going to do with it.
No, that's right. I think how's he led you when you're in tune with him and you're leading worship? Well, I mean, the last time I led worship sort of on a frequent basis was in my last church. So whenever I was leading worship, because where we got to really by the time I left was that it was a very open time. So I would choose perhaps 2 songs tops, and then throw it open. And the good thing was we had a group of musicians who could just pick things up, and if someone started a song, we could figure out the key pretty quickly and
Yeah.
just go with it, you know. So in that way, I think leading worship is giving some direction at the beginning, and then kind of getting out of the way, really. And then, you know, there may be some direction needed occasionally here and there. You know, maybe someone will maybe give a tongue or something. And this is coming away a little bit from music, isn't it? But then, you know, you say, well, we need to wait for the interpretation, you know, and so forth. And then you have to lead things in that way. And then maybe someone will give an interpretation that you think is not right. So then you've got to say, well, perhaps we'll wait a little bit longer. And those sort of. So I think leading worship, I mean, musically wise, I think just being at the disposal, just to be able to pick something up as soon as someone's singing it, and to be able to just go into that, I think that's a really important skill for a church musician.
Yeah. In
that kind of setting.
Yeah.
So to be able to be what's the word?
Spirit-led?
Intuitive? Yeah, intuitive and spirit-led, definitely. I think actually playing, I don't know whether I'll diverge with you and what you think.
Go on.
I don't know. I've heard of people saying, talking about playing prophetically and that sort of thing. This is not something I've ever done myself, and I've not really been sure whether it's a biblical thing. And I had a talk with someone who actually gave me. Well, he was the first person who ever gave me any biblical justification for it, actually, which was really good. So I think. So I'm a little bit on the fence, but I think you can play in a way that can bless someone, certainly, and I think. If you are yourself before the Lord and you're open to Him, you can certainly play in a way which can reach someone's spirit, I think.
Okay, I've been reminded to look at the live chat, and I've got some questions for you. Someone asked me today what God thought about ordinary music. I said that God is a now God, so He likes all music that isn't a bad influence. Is that true?
Now, I guess you're saying God likes music, and I guess He does because He created it. I think anything that is good has been inspired originally by Him.
Because He gives good
things. And so, I think. And all those things can be twisted, obviously, and music can be used as a bad influence, and that's true. So, but I think, musicians, non-Christian musicians, can be playing something which is inspired because it's inherently good. Yeah. I mean, it's a very, very unpopular idea that you can have music which has a moral element, morally good or morally bad. But I think you can, because you can feel it. Certain music just does something to you. I mean, I think a lot of modern classical music, the kind of dissonance and that kind of thing, is an expression of a godless culture, and so the godliness, you can just hear you know, that it's devoid of good.
Okay.
I mean, not all. There are exceptions. Again, it's you can't really make kind of every like these judgment statements, but I think it's been squeezed out of a lot of goodness. I think.
Yes. Well, as you said, good things can be twisted, and I suppose on an individual level, we have to follow the nudges that the Holy Spirit gives us. So I'm conscious, you know, years ago I liked a particular song, then I happened to understand what the words were, and I was thinking, like the tune, but I don't like the sentiment. And you don't disengage your brain when you play music, and it's wise to be aware that you need to have a sense of where it's from, which is different from your taste may differ from mine. You know,
especially in terms of what we've been saying about music. I mean, whether you call it prophetic or not, certainly we both agree that it can affect you deep, really deep down. And so actually, with something that can affect you that deeply, there needs to be a certain amount of care, I think, taken over what we take in. Even when you get beyond the level of lyrics. I mean, lyrics are obvious to a certain degree. But then, what is this saying to me? Music is communication. You know, what is this piece of music actually saying to me? And how is it affecting me? But anyway,
All right, someone has mentioned that, Verity said every good and perfect gift comes from God, even music, or I'd say especially music. And Freya has commented that today's discussion has reminded me of Psalm 150, trumpets, lyres, cymbals, harps, flutes, and certainly lots of dancing. With a lovely Spanish lady emoji there. Absolutely. So, all right. It sounds as though we have the opportunity to break for a song, and having heard Nathan talk about his music, now you have a chance to listen to it. Welcome back. We're sorry with the continued technical hitch. I think Clive is remarkably calm. I would be climbing the wall by now with the mistakes I usually make, so we're sorry about that. But as we mentioned before, go to YouTube, type in Nathan Hayward, and what was the song?
I Wake Up in the Dark.
Yep, so after our conversation, I'd urge you to go and listen to the real thing, as it were. Right, so turning more to your faith, what have been the challenges along the way that God's worked through with you? Are there any you'd care to share?
I think which ones to share? I think the Lord really needs to deal with our pride, and especially, I mean, mentioned before that I was brought up in a Christian home,
right?
And you know, in a very good Christian home, you know, my dad was a missionary, and you gain, just by dint of being in that atmosphere, you gain a certain amount of Bible knowledge, you know. And then you find, you know, you know more than most of your peers in the youth group, and if you really want to go on with the Lord, you'll find you're quite alone. But also it means that it's very tempting to look down on others, you know. And then, you know, when I was about, I think I was just before I was 30, I was asked to be an elder at the church I was at. So I was in eldership for about 10 years. And, you know, preaching fairly regularly and leading worship and that sort of thing. And the Lord has to bring you to a place where you realise, you know, you can't do it. You know, you're not so great after all. And you know, and actually you're nothing. I think over the last few years, the Lord has had to do that with me to, you know, to quite a deep degree, and I'm glad not to be in leadership, and I'm glad just to be privileged to be a daddy, you know, and do what I do, I think
I agree with you that pride is a major issue, because first of all, we can't have a relationship with God without acknowledging I can't do it myself, it's not my way, it's got to be your way. And that is the issue. Well, that's the major issue with free will, in that God wants us to choose him, and quite often there's the, well, I don't need you, and that can be pride. And then when you have made the choice, as you were saying, that sometimes we don't actually realise that he's the one who's perfect and he loves us so much that he overlooks a lot, and just being willing to do life his way, and realising that how he wants to live is actually good for us, as well as being his way, as it were.
I think, you see, when you've been in church all your life, you know the right phrases to say.
Oh yeah.
So you can say 100 times, yeah, I'm worth nothing, it's all of the Lord. And you can know that principle, you know, really well, and you say it, and you say the right things. And then when it actually, the Lord has to hit you with some reality, where you go, whoa, you know, you have to catch your breath, and
yeah, absolutely.
But he has to do it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, in order to change us, something fundamental has to change us, you know, and sometimes he puts us in situations and we are totally broken people or different people afterwards. And I think, but it's for the better in the long run, but it can be jolly shaking when it happens, you know. And I think to do that in us is necessary. For us to take it and submit to it is also necessary, and you know, and I guess that's something the Lord has been helping me with the last few years, just to kind of I mean, I can't go into all situations, but that has been a big thing, you know. The Lord just I would say breaking me to a certain degree.
And how do you, and with that in the background, or that process, how do you keep on going on with God, as it were?
Well, you don't. You're carried to a certain degree. I think, you know, you can't bounce out of bed into an amazing quiet time and then feel spiritual. You know, it's a case of just crying out day by day. You know, a more case of need than you know, hanging on than anything else. And it's so necessary, isn't it? Because then we realise it's not my spiritual life that is driving things. It's my assent to him, you know, and my acceptance of what he wants to do, and a surrender, as it were, you know. I think,
Yeah, and as you say, it isn't just what you say, it isn't what you actually believe. It's when God decides to show you how real it is.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a shock sometimes, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it certainly is. Yes.
So in all of that, has there also been some joy?
Oh yes, yeah, totally. I think you know, we can go through difficult times, whatever, but there's that psalm, isn't there? I can't remember the number now. It talks about, you know, he's taken us through fire and he's caused men to ride over our heads, but he's brought us out to a place of rich fulfillment, or a wide place.
Oh, yeah.
And I really feel that physically as well. Our family moving from this tiny house in London to the place in Elm, which has a lot of outside space. I mean, that's one of the reasons that we went for it, you know, just lots of and it was as if the whole family could breathe, you know, and stretch our legs, and you know, so we've been brought into a wide place, I'd say, and I think if you can, I think when the Lord deals with something, you become more yourself. If you you know, if you let him have his way, and you can just, you're a bit more comfortable in your own skin. You can just relax in who he has made you, you know, and enjoy that, and I'm enjoying that at the moment.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, because when you think that actually he is Almighty God, he can do whatever he wants, and he wants us to work with him, but also to know that our failures don't get in his way either, because if he was waiting for perfection, he wouldn't use any of us.
No.
And he just works his ways, doesn't he?
Yeah, that's right. And I think to know that he understands is a very it's a very important thing, isn't it? I think we need to be careful of perfect leaders.
Well, I don't believe they exist this side of heaven.
Well, that's why we need to be careful, because they don't exist.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if someone's coming across, you know, that they're it, you know, or they never do anything wrong, or there's no, it's really, I think we just need to be careful in those situations. But
I agree. Yeah. So let's have a look at some. Yep, Maggie's commented that when God shows us our weaknesses and sins, it's painful, but it stops us from criticising others, because we eventually learn we are nothing without his grace. I'm still learning that all the time. And you know the one about, you know, don't be bothered about the speck in someone else's eye, but look for the railway sleeper in your own. God catches me out with that one quite often. You know. And you think, I think after however 40 years plus, I would have learnt a bit better, and actually every day I find that I may be slightly along the way, but it's not as far as I'd like it to be.
It's very easy to criticise. It makes us feel better, doesn't it? But you're right, it makes us more understanding.
Yes. Or also knowing that if God knows the worst about me and still loves me, I find security in that I know he will never go off me, because there's nothing I can do that would shock him. Not that I would want to shock him, I hasten to add, everyone. You know, I do want to live life his way, but there is a security in that, and then it's having the grace, that the love that God has shown me, I ought to practice with other people. And if I'm not sure how far I've got with that, it's, you know, you may think I've had a nice time with God this morning, and then if I go out and someone annoys me, I know I haven't learned very much.
Yeah, I think going back to what you say about the Lord knowing us,
Yeah.
you know, and I mean, the Lord can deal with anyone, can't he? No matter what they've done, as long as they admit that they've done it.
Yeah.
You know, so you could be someone who has hardly done anything wrong, but obviously everyone does, who won't admit it, and the Lord cannot deal with that person in terms of he cannot deal with them until they will say, I have done wrong. So we need to keep the attitude of, you know, I am not perfect, you know, I do things wrong every day, and I bring that to the Lord, and just it's by his grace he forgives me. And as you say, you know, you don't use it as an excuse for license. I like to think of it in terms of a football team.
Yeah.
So you're on the Lord's team.
Yep.
Or you're on the other side.
Yeah.
Now, you may be the worst player in the world. You know, you might, you know, score own goals. You know, foul your own players or whatever it is. You know.
Yeah.
But you're on the right team. You know.
Yeah.
And so you know, but you can't go to the other team and use his grace as an excuse for that. You know, that's I think that's a kind of a. I think that's what Paul is saying when he says, you know, can we sin so that grace may abound? Certainly not. No. You know, and there's certain things that he says after that which really point to the same principle. But I think that's it.
Yeah, and also the thing I find really sad in the mindset of most people today, and sometimes Christians, is they think that God's way is boring or narrow or too restrictive, when in fact the way he wants us to live life is much bigger and exciting than what we give him credit for. And actually a lot of, as you say, the other team's side is out to destroy us or to destroy other people, and is activities that actually aren't good for us. And it's just a shame that, and sadly I think sometimes as Christians we sell that picture of, you know, God says you can't do this, this, this and this, and actually we haven't said, well, but there's loads of other stuff you can do, and he inspires, and he's life, and it is life in its fullness rather than in its narrowness, but as you said, with a moral reality that is goodness. But where you get a question out of all of that, I have no idea.
It's a good. How do we? I think temptation shouts, doesn't it? So you know, this is what you want, and it tempts, and it, you know, it draws you, whatever, and you know, you can give in to that and say, well, that's what I want, you know, and this is what a good time is, or this is what, you know, and yet living the Lord's way brings us to ourselves. I think, you know, it brings out who we really are, and it enables our true potential and obviously our true purpose to be lived out. And it's really hard to shout that over the top of the voice of temptation, especially nowadays, you know, when everyone's got screens on their person,
Yeah.
With temptation, you know, for all kinds of things, and you know, and obviously there's good things that we all love, and all the rest of it. I was thinking about the Logos.
Yeah.
And you know, he was there when the world was made.
Yeah.
The word, the Logos, he essentially is the unifying reason that we're here. He, you know, why is there anything real at all? It's because he was there.
And he spoke the word.
He spoke. Now, why does a tree grow as it grows?
Mm-hmm.
Because of the Logos.
Yeah.
Why does, you know, why do we have these seasons? Because of the Logos, you know. Why are there times and seasons? All of these things. So, us creatures who have free will still have the Logos.
Yeah.
But unlike a tree or an animal, we can reject it.
Yeah.
So we have the Logos in his word. If we live according to the Logos,
yeah,
we become our true selves.
Yeah.
We are living out the purpose for humanity.
Yeah.
You know, the very reason we are made, the very reason we are still breathing. You know, how is reality sustained? It's because of the Logos. You know, so if we can get to him, you know, if we can have that relationship with him, and it's not a forced thing, you know, my efforts, my spirituality, you know, it's more an ascent to God.
Yeah.
Then we become who we are, you know.
Yes. Yeah, I do get a sense, not always, because sometimes effort is required, but when I'm living life his way, there are certain things that are easy to do because he's in it. And I like the idea in John 15 where he's the gardener, I'm the vine, and the only way I find myself in a way is being plugged into him, consciously or unconsciously, knowing that as I grow, he'll prune things off as he needs to, but the growth needs to come from him. Yeah. And yeah, he's big enough to deal with all of it. Yeah. So there was a question going back. Yeah, are Psalms prophetic music? Was a question.
Well, a psalm in a technical way is a poem set to music.
Yeah.
So you could argue the words are prophetic, no matter what tune you put it to. You could argue that. So
and also you would say it's prophetic, because I'm thinking of Psalm 22 where the psalmist hundreds of years beforehand spoke of Jesus' crucifixion but didn't know that's what he was doing.
There's no doubt that the Psalms are prophetic. Yeah. But are they prophetic music? Are they prophetic lyrics? That would be the distinction.
Why would you need to make that distinction?
Because
because prophetic means talking God's words, or right? So can't he inhabit both lyrics and song?
I'm not saying there is no such thing as prophetic music. Yeah. But I'm just saying, you know, I don't think you can say, because the Psalms are prophetic, therefore music can be prophetic. No,
but I don't think the question was that as...
they're definitely prophetic.
Yeah.
And I think I don't want to get into hot water here, because I know that the Lord does use music, and I mean,
Yeah.
He had, the prophets had people playing for them, and that sort of thing, and as I've said already, music affects us in a very deep way, and can really bring about a change in us. So I'm just.
Yeah, you're sitting on the fence then.
And I'm conscious of a lot of things that have gone under the name of prophetic music.
Oh, okay.
Which was certainly not, so,
okay.
Yeah.
Yes, and also going back to the Psalms as they're not just, they're poems. Yes, they're prophetic, looking to Jesus because he's threaded through everything anyway, and also they were born out of experience. So
and they were put to music.
Yes. Yeah.
So music played a part.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So yeah.
Right.
I had something recently about psalms and songs. So there's one psalm which starts off a psalm,
right,
and then it says, "Sing a new song." And the Hebrew word is different, obviously, for psalm and song.
Oh,
now,
okay.
The Hebrew word for song is the same, pretty much the same as the word for sing.
Yeah.
Now, my little 4-year-old, I could walk into a room and she's just singing.
Yeah.
And you don't think, what song is she singing? Because she's not. She's just singing.
Because she's singing.
Because she's singing. She's playing away. She's happy and she's singing.
Yeah.
Singing is a very spontaneous thing. Very kind of, it can be. And a psalm is a poem set to music. It's very free.
Yeah.
And it's very, you've got to have had a lot of thought, meditated in the word or over the concept that you're thinking about, really thought it through and brought these words out, and then it's set to music. So I think in our lives we need both. We need the times where we think on the word and we think seriously about it, but we also need the spontaneous, the song, both in our lives and our faith.
Absolutely. Anyway, thank you to everyone who's stayed with us while we've been having our conversation about music and faith and life generally. So if we meet again remotely like this on Sunday morning at 10:30, and I'd like to thank Nathan for daring to come and sit in the chair and have this conversation. So thank you very much, Nathan.
Lovely. Thanks for having me. Thank you. I wake up in the dark, so longing for your light. From dreams I disembark and face reality. The troubles of my life come rushing through my head, then piercing like a knife comes my anxiety. Draw me near to you, Lord. Hear my prayer, hear my prayer. Take my fear to you, Lord. Rescue me. Draw me near to you, Lord. Hear my prayer, hear my prayer. Take my fear to you, Lord. Rescue me. The weeping of the night subsides to morning joy, for matchless is the might of him who saves me. For those who dwelt in gloom have seen the greatest light. The shadow of the tomb gives way to morning. Draw me near to you, Lord. Hear my prayer, oh, hear my prayer. Take my fear to you, Lord. Rescue me. Draw me near to you, Lord. Hear my prayer, oh, hear my prayer. Take my fear to you, Lord. Rescue me. Draw me near to you, Lord. Hear my prayer, hear my prayer. Take my fear to you, Lord. Rescue me. Draw me near to you, Lord. Hear my prayer, hear my prayer. Take my fear to you, Lord. Rescue me. See the shining hope. Oh, open up your eyes. Oh, widen out your scope. See true reality. To serve the Lord of light, to see beyond this world, to futures full and bright, lit by His majesty. Draw me near to you, Lord. Hear my prayer, oh, hear my prayer. Take my fear to you, Lord. Rescue me. Draw me near to you, Lord. Hear my prayer, oh, hear my prayer. Take my fear to you, Lord. Rescue me.